Hey guys, tonight we step into the chill breath of the north, the kind that nips your nose before you even open the longhouse door. The wind outside howls like an impatient god, and your wool tunic clings to the scent of smoke and salted fish. It's another morning in the Viking world, somewhere around the 9th century, and you're about to do something both utterly ordinary and bizarrely heroic. Figure out how to iron your shirt. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you look neat doing it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The longhouse is waking up around you. Low murmurs, boots thudding against packed earth, the familiar scrape of a wooden spoon against a cauldron. Outside, frost clings to the fjord grass like tiny runes, each one whispering that the gods invented winter just to see who'd flinch first. You tug at your tunic, realizing it's gone stiff overnight, wrinkled from being hung too close to the fire. There's no electricity, no laundry room, no smug laundry pod commercials. Just you, some wool, and the eternal enemy, damp, cold cloth that refuses to behave. Someone nearby curses in Old Norse, probably over a frozen water bucket. And that's when you spot it. A flat, smooth stone by the hearth, blackened at one edge. You remember hearing the elders say it's used for smoothing cloth. You grab it, curious, your fingers prickling from the heat that still lingers in the stone. No handle, no cord, no setting for delicate linen, just pure prehistoric ingenuity. You press the stone against your tunic, steam hissing faintly where the wool meets warmth. It smells faintly of smoke, lanolin, and adventure. For a moment, it almost feels modern, like your Viking self has invented a one-stone version of the iron. The effect is mediocre. The wrinkle lessens but doesn't vanish. You sigh, then grin. Perfection isn't really a Viking virtue. Survival is. Outside, the fjord glitters beneath a weak morning sun. A gull screams overhead, sounding personally offended by your laundry attempts. You step out to hang your garment on a wooden pole stuck into the snow, today's clothesline. The air is crisp enough to turn breath into crystals, but the sunlight glances off the ice like a promise that something better is coming. The truth is, the Vikings weren't just warriors, they were obsessive about appearance. Archaeologists have found combs, tweezers, even ear scoops in graves. Hygiene mattered, clothes mattered. You can imagine a chieftain frowning over a wrinkled tunic before a feast, muttering, "How can I look terrifying if my linen looks tired?" Fair question. You head back inside to the longhouse, where smoke coils upward through a hole in the roof. The air smells of wood tar and roasted lamb. Someone's laughing near the fire, probably mocking your stone ironing experiment, but that's fine. You're already thinking about how to make it work better. Maybe wetter cloth, maybe smoother stones. The Viking brain never stops tinkering. Fun fact, most Viking clothing was made of wool or linen, spun and woven at home. Linen was prized for its smoothness and cool touch, perfect for undergarments. Wool, thicker and lanolin-rich, kept out the cold. To clean and soften them, people used soapwort or lye, basically plant saponins and wood ash mixed with water. The result, a kind of ancient detergent that got the job done, even if it smelled vaguely like campfire and despair. And here's a quirky tidbit. Viking women sometimes bleached linen by spreading it out on meadows under the sun, a process called grass bleaching. It could take weeks, but the result was fabric so pale it shimmered in torchlight. Imagine the pride, your shirt practically glowing in the gloom of a mead hall. Historians still argue whether the so-called slick stones found in graves were used for smoothing cloth or shaping seams. They're often polished pieces of glass or stone, sometimes found alongside small bowls that might have been heated. A primitive iron, or just a fancy sewing weight? The debate continues. But tonight, in your Viking hands, the slick stone feels like a tool and a relic of curiosity, a bridge between fire and fashion. The longhouse crackles with warmth, and the chatter rises. Someone's recounting the latest raid to the east, where silk and silver gleamed like treasure in the smoke. You're half listening, half daydreaming about how that silk might feel. Smooth, perfect, no wrinkles ever. Maybe those Southerners have better ironing techniques. Maybe they don't iron because the weather's so warm their shirts dry themselves. Lucky devils. Your fingers itch to experiment more. You soak a rag in hot water from the stew pot, wring it out, and place it over the tunic before pressing the stone again. Steam bursts upward. It works better this time. The fabric softens, the wrinkles melt a little. You grin, triumphant. A tiny domestic victory in the saga of existence. Somewhere, Odin probably smirks and raises an eyebrow. Behold, the mortal who tamed wool. The wind howls outside, rattling the wooden walls. Someone throws another log on the fire, sparks spiraling up like tiny stars. You sit there, watching your tunic dry, the faint warmth brushing your cheeks. There's a strange comfort in this rhythm. The heat, the steam, the smell of clean cloth in a world where comfort is rare. Another villager plops down beside you, muttering about needing his cloak smooth for the god thing tomorrow. You offer your newly discovered technique. Soon there's a line of curious onlookers, everyone with their own wrinkled garments, their own theories. Someone suggests using sand to polish the stone smoother. Another jokes that Thor's hammer could flatten linen in one strike, though it might also vaporize it. The air fills with laughter, and for a moment, the Viking world doesn't feel all blood and conquest. It feels domestic, communal, weirdly human. These are people who roast meat, sing songs, love their families, and yes, fret about creases. The same mix of vanity and practicality that still lives in every laundry room today. By nightfall, the longhouse glows amber, and your tunic hangs neatly by the fire, dry and warm. It isn't perfect, but it's good enough to face the next raid, feast, or judgment day. You stretch, yawn, and watch sparks drift upwards, vanishing into the dark. Outside, the snow crunches softly as someone walks past, humming an old tune about gods and good harvests. You lean back, feeling the steady pulse of the hearth behind you, the whisper of steam still in your mind. Tomorrow, you'll head to the fjord to wash more clothes, to perfect your technique. Maybe one day they'll name the invention after you. Or maybe they'll just remember the story of the Viking who refused to wear wrinkles into battle. Either way, not bad for a morning's work.
The next morning begins before dawn, when the sky over the fjord is the color of iron and silence hums like a sleeping beast. You wrap your cloak tighter, the wool heavy with yesterday's smoke, and step outside. The air tastes of salt and frost, and you can see the faint shimmer of ice forming where the river meets the sea. It's laundry day, though day feels generous when the sun can't be bothered to rise properly before breakfast. You haul a wooden bucket toward the water, each step crunching through snow that squeaks like small complaints beneath your boots. Inside the bucket sits a tangled mess of tunics, breeches, and the occasional mystery rag. You tell yourself you'll sort it out later, even though you know you won't. Laundry is a universal language of procrastination. By the time you reach the stream, your breath forms slow ghosts in the air. You kneel at the edge, break a film of ice, and instantly regret every decision that led you here. The water bites, sharp, merciless. You plunge your hands in anyway because in this world, comfort is a luxury. And cleanliness, strangely enough, is pride. The Vikings weren't savages. They were surprisingly meticulous. Archaeological digs show soap made from animal fat and wood ash, known as lye soap. It wasn't gentle. Your skin might peel like a bad sunburn, but it worked. Add a dash of ash and some boiled water and congratulations, you've made Viking tide. You take a deep breath and begin scrubbing. The linen hisses against the rough stones. It's oddly satisfying, the rhythm of it. Your fingers go numb, then tingle, then stop complaining altogether. The scent of wet cloth mixes with the cold air until you can almost taste the effort. Try soapwort, someone behind you suggests. You glance back to see an older woman, hair braided tight, holding a bundle of greenish roots. She grins, missing a tooth. Boil it, mash it, rub it. Better for your hands. Smells nice too, if you like flowers that gave up on life halfway through blooming. You nod gratefully. Soapwort, also called bouncing bet, was the ancient world's secret weapon. The roots foam when crushed in water, a natural detergent that doesn't strip fabric the way lye does. You crush a few stems, mix them into the bucket, and watch the water cloud up into something that looks deceptively gentle. As you work, sunlight finally spills across the fjord in thin gold bands. You spread each garment over smooth stones to rinse, your knuckles red but victorious. Every so often, a gust of wind whips through, lifting the edges of the cloth like sails on tiny ships. One shirt flaps dramatically and escapes into the current. You lunge, nearly faceplant into the river, and snag it by the sleeve. A nearby fisherman applauds your reflexes with mock solemnity. "Another warrior trained by the laundry gods," he says. You bow slightly because dignity must be preserved, even when dripping wet. There's something hypnotic about the whole routine. The swoosh of fabric, the slap of water, the faint crackle of ice reforming along the edges. You start humming under your breath, a low, steady rhythm that matches the pulse of the fjord. The laundry ritual, you realize, is as much about patience as cleanliness. In a world where raiding and survival define most days, this quiet, repetitive act becomes a form of meditation. It's not glamorous, but it's grounding. And here's a quirky historical tidbit for you. Vikings used urine, yes, actual human urine, as a fabric softener and stain remover. The ammonia in it broke down oils and brightened fabrics. Imagine explaining that to your modern dry cleaner. You smile to yourself, grateful that your version of the past doesn't come with a bucket of that. Still, you can almost respect it. These were people who didn't waste anything. They saw usefulness where modern minds see disgust. You wring out another tunic and wondering how many modern luxuries owe their existence to ancestors who weren't afraid to get their hands dirty or smelly. Historians still argue whether washing clothes was a daily habit or a communal ritual done weekly. Some think it was a woman's task. Others believe men helped when traveling or preparing for festivals. The sagas mentioned laundresses at camp, sometimes mortal, sometimes supernatural. You can't help but imagine ghostly washerwomen crouched beside you, humming through the mist, scrubbing the blood from warriors' garments after battle. A sudden gust makes you glance up. Across the water, mountains rise, blue-gray and ancient. Smoke curls from a distant settlement. The air is so clear you can almost hear it. Life unfolding in small sounds. Hammers striking, dogs barking, a child laughing somewhere unseen. You dip your hands back into the bucket and keep working. By midday, your laundry rocks resemble a patchwork of white and brown flags. You wring out the last garment and hang it over a line strung between birch poles. Each piece flutters like a captive ghost. Steam rises faintly, catching the sunlight in delicate tendrils. You stand back, proud. The fjord glints, your hands sting, and the world feels slightly cleaner. For a brief, ridiculous moment, you imagine the gods watching you, nodding approvingly. Thor might smite giants, but you've conquered laundry. Back in the longhouse, the warmth hits like a gentle slap. Someone's already boiling stew, and the smell of lamb and herbs fills the air. You hang your damp tunic near the hearth again, this time careful not to scorch it. The memory of yesterday's burnt patch still haunts you. You settle onto a low bench, stretching your sore arms. A friend across the fire holds up a slick, blackened stone, similar to yours, and says, "Tried heating it in the coals first. Nearly burned my sleeve off. Works faster, though." You both laugh, training tips like modern laundry influencers with a death wish. You tell him about the soap wart. He tells you about using sand mixed with ash to scrub linen whiter. "Just don't overdo it," he warns. "Too much and you'll sandpaper your tunic into oblivion." You promise to keep that in mind. Evening seeps in slowly. The horizon burns with soft pink light, and shadows stretch across the packed earth floor. The rhythmic creak of someone sharpening an axe blends with the faint drip of ice melting outside. It's all strangely peaceful. You watch the flames flicker and realize that the same people who sailed across oceans also spent hours fussing over clean shirts. Maybe that's what civilization really is, Not just ships and swords, but soap and stones, and the quiet insistence on order amid chaos. Your tunic dries by the fire, the fabric faintly crisp. You run your hand over it, marveling at how smooth it feels compared to yesterday. It's not perfect, but then again, neither is anything in this world. Still, it's good enough to wear proudly to the next feast, or battle, depending on how the day goes. As the mead starts to flow and laughter fills the longhouse, you lean back and sigh. Laundry by fjord light, harsh, freezing, absurdly satisfying. You made it through another wash day without frostbite or humiliation. The gods can keep their thunderbolts. You've mastered the far more dangerous art of staying tidy in a world built on mud and mead.
The fire still smolders from the night before, its glow casting lazy shadows on the beams above you. The longhouse hums with morning life, soft murmurs, a cough here, the crackle of kindling being coaxed back to flame. You sit up, stretch, and instantly notice the chill air wrapping itself around your neck like an unwelcome scarf. Your tunic from yesterday hangs nearby, clean and dry, but wrinkled again, of course. Somewhere deep inside you swear you can hear the gods laughing. You drag yourself to the hearth, drawn by the hypnotic warmth and the faint hiss of damp wood. Steam curls upward as someone stirs a pot. Another Viking pokes at embers with a stick, muttering about getting the fire hot enough to cook bread and burn regrets. You can relate. Today's mission? Harness that same heat to tackle your wrinkled tunic. Again. You've heard rumors of a trick, something about steam and stones. Not the stone you used yesterday, but smooth, river-polished rocks heated near the fire, hot enough to sing but not to scorch. The idea sounds half genius, half insanity. Perfect Viking logic. You fish through the pile of stones by the hearth and find one that feels right. Not too big, slightly flat, streaked with white quartz. You nestle it near the fire, close enough to glow with anticipation. The air smells of burning oak and wool, comfort and danger in equal measure. A friend watches, chewing on a strip of dried fish. "Planning to forge a shirt?" he asks. You grin, just taming one. After a few minutes, the stone radiates warmth like a miniature sun. You wrap it in a scrap of linen to hold it safely, then hover it over your tunic. Steam begins to rise where the heat kisses the damp cloth. You press gently, move slowly, feel the fibers relax beneath your touch. It's mesmerizing. The hiss, the smell, the transformation. You're effectively standing at the dawn of laundry science, part domestic ritual, part sorcery. Somewhere in another millennium, someone will invent the electric iron. But for now, you've got a hot rock, a damp shirt, and a dream. Steam fills the air, curling like breath from sleeping giants. You imagine this method passed quietly through generations, mothers teaching daughters, men learning it before journeys, all refining a craft as humble as it is ingenious. The Vikings weren't just raiders, they were engineers of survival. Fun fact: the mead halls of Scandinavia weren't just for drinking and boasting. They were multi-purpose centers of life. Weddings, judgments, feasts, crafting, even fabric maintenance. Archaeological evidence shows tools like slickstones and whalebone smoothers often found in domestic layers near hearths, not buried in graves. It suggests these weren't ceremonial. These were daily essentials. As you press another section of fabric, the surface takes on a subtle sheen. It's not glossy like silk, but it feels civilized somehow. The kind of detail that says, yes, I sail across seas and fight monsters, but I also care about looking sharp while doing it. You chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Somewhere, in an alternate world, a Viking influencer might be saying, 5 tricks to keep your tunic wrinkle-free during raids. Number 3 will shock Thor himself. The smell of steaming linen mingles with the savory scent of barley porridge. Someone offers you a cup of ale to steady your hands, because nothing says safety like alcohol and glowing hot rocks. You take a sip anyway, for courage. The rhythmic press and lift becomes almost meditative. The flicker of firelight dances across the fabric like waves on the sea, and you drift into thought. There's something deeply human about this, finding small comforts, crafting beauty from hardship. The world outside might be chaos, but inside you can at least have smooth sleeves. A younger boy watches curiously. Why not just wear it wrinkled? He asks. You pause, considering. Because, you say, wrinkles tell the world you've given up. He nods solemnly, probably deciding adulthood is just a long war against laundry. Here's a quirky tidbit to share before the steam fades. Some archaeologists once found fragments of glassy, polished stones in Viking settlements and weren't sure what they were. Some thought gaming pieces, others weights. But under microscopic analysis, faint traces of fabric fibers clung to them. That suggests they were used to smooth or polish cloth, like handheld pre-industrial irons. Imagine discovering your ancestors' version of a travel iron buried beside a brooch. Historians still argue whether those stones were used hot or cold. Some claim they were simply rubbed along seams to compress threads. Others insist they were heated, producing the same steam effect you're experimenting with now. Either way, you're standing in the middle of that mystery, the smell of damp wool and wood smoke wrapping you like evidence. The longhouse hums quietly, every sound muffled by thick timber walls. A woman nearby works a loom, the click of wooden pegs blending with the crackle of fire. Threads stretch taut between her fingers, as disciplined as warriors. You realize how much of Viking life revolves around fabric, making it, wearing it, preserving it. Each thread, each fold, a marker of care and culture. You switch to another garment, this one rougher, heavier. The steam hits your face as you work, soft and ghostly. Sweat beads on your forehead, but you keep going, lost in the trance of routine. Outside, the fjord wind howls like an impatient guest, rattling the walls, trying to get in. You ignore it. The world can wait. The shirt cannot. And then, without warning, the rock slips. You yelp, drop it, and watch it roll dangerously close to the wooden floorboards. A few sparks leap from the hearth. A quick stomp, a nervous laugh, and disaster is narrowly averted. Around the room, heads turn briefly, then go back to their business. Just another day, another near fire caused by fashion. By midday, you're surrounded by neatly smoothed tunics, cloaks, and bits of linen. The air feels different, warmer, softer, smelling faintly of steam and pride. You sit back, admiring your handiwork. The wrinkles are mostly gone, replaced with faint lines of effort. Someone jokes, "You could start charging for that." You grin. "I'll make the first Viking spa, steam, stones, and mead." The laughter that follows rolls through the hall like a friendly tide. You wrap your tools carefully and set them aside. The hot stones cool slowly, releasing faint whispers of warmth. You can almost hear them sigh, relieved to have served their purpose. Outside, snow begins to fall, flakes drifting past the smoke hole like lazy spirits. You step out into the cold, letting the chill bite your flushed face. The fjord lies still and silver beneath the winter sun. You raise your hands to the sky, stretch, and let the air fill your lungs until it burns. The world is hard, but you found small mastery in it, a patch of control over chaos. You head back inside, hang your tunic near the door, and pour another cup of ale. The fire hums, your muscles ache, and the fabric of your shirt glows faintly in the dim light. You smile. You've earned that glow. And somewhere deep in the folds of history, this moment, one Viking, one tunic, one perfect press, ripples forward, unnoticed but eternal.
You wake to the gentle rhythm of rain tapping on the thatched roof, a rare softness in the usually brutal north. The air smells damp, earthy, with a hint of iron and ash. Your hands are rough from yesterday's steam experiments, but your mind hums with curiosity. That smooth stone method worked, but it's clumsy. There has to be something better, something cleverer, something Viking clever. By the fire, a few villagers sit hunched over small wooden boxes filled with strange odds and ends, carved bones, curved stones, bits of bronze that glint like captured sunlight. You wander over, drawn by the glimmer. One woman lifts a polished piece of whalebone and runs it over her sleeve. The motion is slow, deliberate, the kind of confidence born from repetition. The fabric beneath her hand smooths instantly, fibers tightening into neat order. You watch, entranced. "What is that?" you ask. She grins. "A smoother. Works better than your rock trick, I'll wager." You take the bone in your hand. It's cool, heavy, and gleams faintly under the firelight. One end has been worn to satin by use, the surface so glossy it could catch the reflection of a candle. You try it, pressing it against a damp patch of linen, gliding it slowly back and forth. The effect is magical. The wrinkles fade like they were never there. This, you realize, is the Viking iron, only quieter, older, made not from steel, but from sea giants. Fun fact, archaeologists have found dozens of these linen smoothers across Scandinavia and the British Isles, often carved from whalebone or glass. Many come paired with small bronze bowls, heated dishes that, when filled with glowing coals or hot stones, kept the smoother warm. In some graves, both items were buried together, suggesting they were valuable personal tools, maybe even status symbols. The woman gestures toward one of those bowls resting near the hearth. "That one belonged to my mother," she said proudly. "She always said a neat seam kept away bad luck." You pick it up carefully. The bronze feels ancient, almost alive. Its surface ripples with age and faint soot stains the rim. You nestle a few embers inside, the metal hissing faintly. Then you rest the bone smoother over the edge, letting it warm like a cat in sunlight. The smell of hot metal mixes with wood smoke and wool. You dip your fingers in water, test the heat. It's perfect. Pressing again, you move the bone across your tunic. Steam rises and the fibers respond instantly, softening and aligning. It's satisfying on a level you can't explain, half craftsmanship, half sorcery. Someone across the hall watches and nods. "You'll be wanting a slickstone next," he says. He rummages through a pouch and pulls out a lump of dark glass, volcanic, glossy, shaped like a flattened egg. "From the Westman Islands," he explains. "My uncle swore by it. Rub it over linen seams and it shines like moonlight." You take it, marveling at the texture, smooth, cool, oddly comforting.
You try it along the collar of your tunic, and sure enough, it leaves a subtle sheen. Better than a combed beard, you mutter, earning a laugh. You pause, realizing something strange. These tools, though simple, carry whispers of sophistication. They're not crude gadgets born of necessity. They're deliberate instruments of pride. It's one thing to fight dragons, another to refuse to look wrinkled while doing it. A boy beside you points at the whalebone piece. They say some were carved from the jawbones of whales that washed ashore after storms. The sea gave gifts to those who watched for them. You imagine it. The great carcass on the beach, bones glistening in the rain, villagers cutting pieces for tools, tokens, maybe even beauty. Nothing wasted. Every piece reimagined. The North taught its people to find elegance in efficiency. Historians still argue whether these smoothers were purely functional or partly ceremonial. Some graves contain them beside jewelry, as though they represented domestic skill or feminine prestige. Others argue they were multi-use, fabric tools by day, weapons against boredom by night. But today, in your hands, they're symbols of something deeper, the yearning for refinement in a raw world. The rain outside grows heavier, drumming on the roof until it drowns conversation. You sit by the fire, sliding the bone smoother back and forth, lulled by rhythm. The act becomes hypnotic. Heat, motion, steam, sigh. You can almost feel time folding in on itself, centuries compressing like cloth under pressure. Across the hall, someone sharpens a knife and another mends a cloak. Domestic noise weaves together with the storm's percussion, creating a symphony of survival. Each sound has its place, each gesture its own quiet power. You wonder if the gods ever envy humans for moments like this. Not the battles or the glory, but the simple, tactile grace of tending to the small things. You glance around at the faces glowing in firelight. The smoothers, slick stones, and bronze bowls pass from hand to hand. Each person adds a story. One swears hers makes wool shine better than linen. Another insists his grandmother's smoother could charm the wrinkles off a troll. You laugh because you kinda believe it. Here's another quirky fact. Some glass smoothers found in Viking settlements were likely imported from England or even the Frankish lands, where similar tools existed centuries earlier. That means trade routes weren't just about silver and spices, they were about domestic tech. Somewhere out there, a merchant risked storms and sword fights to deliver the ancient equivalent of a fancy garment steamer. You tilt your newly pressed tunic toward the firelight. It gleams faintly, the fabric taut, edges crisp. You slide your hand down the sleeve and feel the quiet satisfaction of mastery. It's not perfection, but it's civilization made visible, stitched into every fiber. Someone brings a jug of mead, and you all drink, laughing at how serious you've become about wrinkles. Next thing, one man jokes, we'll start competing for the shiniest cloak. Another raises his cup. May the gods bless the smooth tunic and curse the crumpled one. The room fills with laughter, echoing through smoke and shadow. You lean back, watching the whalebone cooler now, its polished surface catching the dance of the flames. You think about how these tools, simple, beautiful, quietly vital, outlived their makers. Buried, forgotten, rediscovered centuries later, they tell stories without words. The rain eases, leaving only a slow drip from the roof. You stand, stretch, and fold your tunic carefully. The scent of smoke and clean cloth lingers in the air. Outside, the world gleams wet and silver, the fjord reflecting faint light like liquid glass. You step to the doorway and breathe in deeply. The storm has washed everything raw again. Behind you, the long house murmurs on, voices, fire, the soft scrape of bone against linen. In that humble sound lies the secret of survival. Not strength, not conquest, but care. You look down at your hands, rough and reddened, holding tools shaped from sea and earth. You smile. You may not have gold or glory, but tonight your shirt could impress even Odin. And really, that's victory enough.
By morning, the rain has passed, and the fjord gleams like polished pewter beneath the low winter sun. The air is still damp, but it carries that faint, metallic scent that comes after a storm, like the world's been scrubbed clean and left out to dry. You step outside, tunic smooth, sleeves rolled, ready to face another day in the north. But today isn't about weathering storms or taming cloth. It's about something subtler. You're about to learn that clothes in Viking society weren't just protection against the cold. They were identity, stitched into fabric, class sewn into seams. Your neighbor, a broad-shouldered man with a beard thick enough to hide livestock, waves you over. "The Jarl's feast tonight," he says. "You'll want to wear your best." Your best. You glance down at your modest linen tunic, neatly pressed but simple. It's functional, honest, the kind of garment that says, "I have chores, not titles." But in the Viking world, garments were a language, and wrinkles were only part of the conversation. Inside your longhouse, bundles of fabric line the shelves, rough gray wool for everyday wear, softer dyed pieces for special occasions. You run your fingers along a piece of blue cloth, the kind that required imported wool dye, rare and expensive. A single sleeve in that color could declare your rank louder than a horn blast. You consider adding it to your outfit, but hesitate. Blue like this belonged to those higher up the ladder, the ones who owned ships, not just oars. You sigh. Laundry might make you look civilized, but social polish takes more than clean sleeves. As you begin sorting your garments, a friend enters carrying a finely woven cloak, its edge trimmed with fur. It's dazzling, the kind of piece that screams wealth. He grins. "Borrowed it," he admits, "just for tonight. The Jarl never notices what's missing when he's deep in mead." You both laugh, though you know he's partly serious. The feast is as much about display as it is about food. Every fold, every fabric is theater. The chieftains wear wool so soft it almost flows like water, dyed in deep reds and greens. Traders sport foreign silks they bartered from the east. Even the warriors, those self-proclaimed enemies of vanity, carefully comb their hair and polish their brooches until they gleam like new coin. You smooth your tunic one last time with your trusty whalebone tool. It shines faintly in the dim light, modest but respectable. You add a belt of braided leather, not new, but well kept, and pin your cloak with a simple bronze brooch. It's not opulent, but it says, "I take care of what I have." Here's your mainstream historical fact to tuck into your sleeve. Viking clothing wasn't uniform. Material, color, and decoration varied by wealth and trade access. The poor wore coarse, undyed wool, while elites flaunted imported silks and patterned linen. Archaeologists have even found traces of gold and silver thread in high-status graves. Yes, the same hands that rode through storms also wove literal treasure into fabric. You step out, ready for the feast. The village hums with preparation, fires smoking, bread baking, the faint clang of metal bowls being polished. Even the children are scrubbed and dressed, their faces shining like new coins. The smell of roasted meat fills the air, thick and sweet. At the great hall, torches line the doorway, smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. You enter, and warmth embraces you immediately. Every surface glows, wood, bronze, cloth, and faces flushed with anticipation. You take a seat near the fire, close enough to feel the heat lick your hands, but not enough to melt your resolve. Around you, the fashion show begins. The Jarl's wife wears a gown so fine it seems to whisper when she moves. It's edged with delicate embroidery, tiny knots forming patterns that resemble waves, perhaps a nod to their seafaring legacy. Across the hall, a blacksmith wears a tunic so stiff it could probably stand without him, but he's polished the iron brooch at his shoulder until it catches every flicker of flame. You realize now, ironing wasn't just about comfort, it was about status, maintenance. Wrinkle-free linen was a badge of care, of dignity.
In a land where everything was forged, sewn, or hunted by hand, the smoothness of your tunic spoke volumes. A friend nudges you and nods towards a wealthy trader from Hedabai. His clothes shimmer subtly in the firelight. "That's silk," your friend whispers. "Came all the way from Byzantium. They say he traded amber and furs for it." You lean closer, fascinated. Silk in the far north, an improbable luxury. The man gestures grandly, his sleeves catching light like water rippling in moonlight. You can almost feel the envy ripple through the room. Here's your quirky tidbit. Silk has been found in Viking graves across Scandinavia, sometimes cut into small strips or sewn as trim to wool garments. It wasn't for comfort, it was for show. A flash of foreign shimmer said, "I've seen the world, and I've brought it home." You can't help but smirk. The Vikings may have been fierce, but they weren't immune to the age-old temptation of flexing. As the feast unfolds, the hall grows louder, hotter, more chaotic. Mead sloshes, songs rise, and laughter echoes off the timber walls. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a bronze bowl. Your tunic is still smooth, your collar crisp. You allow yourself a small, smug smile. Historians still argue whether personal grooming in Viking culture was vanity or necessity. Some point to written accounts by English monks describing Northumberland as vain about their hair and cleanliness. Others say it was simply practical, a defense against lice and odor in close quarters. But tonight, surrounded by gleaming fabrics and perfumed hair, you'd bet your smoothest tunic it was pride. The Jarl raises his cup, toasting the bounty of trade and the strength of his people. Firelight flares across the hall, catching the polished stones and bright fabrics. You lift your cup too, feeling the weight of belonging, not just in this moment, but in a long tradition of humans trying to look their best even when the world is rough. Later, when the mead has dulled the edge of your thoughts, you slip outside. The night is crisp, stars scattered across the sky like spilled silver. You stand there, cloak tight around you, feeling the weight of fabric against your skin. Somewhere down the slope, a woman hums a lullaby while beating clothes against a rock by torchlight. Still working, still smoothing, still caring. You breathe in the scent of smoke and cold and linen. Civilization, you realize, isn't built on stone or iron. It's built on little acts of order. A pressed sleeve, a brushed beard, a clean tunic before a feast. You run your fingers over your cloak one last time before heading home. Tomorrow it will wrinkle again. Everything does. But tonight it's smooth, and you, ordinary, practical, quietly proud, are part of something far larger than any one person or feast.
Dawn comes too soon, as it always does after a feast. Your head hums faintly with the ghost of mead, and the smell of smoke clings to your cloak like an overly affectionate cat. You pull yourself upright, squinting at the lights spilling through the slats of the longhouse roof. Outside, gulls scream over the fjord, and the distant creak of wood reminds you that today isn't a rest day. It's a departure day. The longship waits. You drag your sea chest toward the door, muttering about how no one ever invented a Viking-sized suitcase with wheels. Inside the chest, your spare tunics, wool leggings, a fur cloak, and the smooth whalebone iron you've grown oddly fond of. It's not just a tool anymore. It's a talisman of order in a world that loves chaos. The morning air slaps you awake as you step outside. The ship lies tethered at the small wooden pier, sleek and black as a raven's wing. Crew members haul barrels, sharpen blades, and argue cheerfully about who snored loudest last night. You join them, but your mind drifts, not to the journey ahead, but to a very practical question. How on earth does one keep clothes decent on a longship? Turns out laundry doesn't stop just because you're pillaging. You heave your belongings aboard, careful not to drop anything into the salt water below. Salt, after all, is the sworn enemy of linen. It leaves stiff white crusts and eats away at the fibers.
You've learned that the hard way. Still, salt is unavoidable out here. You settle your things near the bow, under a tarp that smells faintly of pitch and fish. When the ship pushes off, oars dipping in perfect rhythm, you feel the familiar thrill of motion. The fjord slides past like a mirror turned sideways. The cold spray bites your face, and you can almost taste the iron in the wind. But beneath the adventure, a quieter rhythm beats. Chores, maintenance, survival. And yes, that includes laundry. It's an unromantic image, isn't it? The fierce Viking warrior crouched at the ship's edge, sloshing his tunic in seawater. But someone has to do it, and it's usually the one who complains least. That means you. You scoop seawater into a bucket, mixing in a bit of ash soap. What passes for detergent in this world? The mixture fizzes faintly, smelling of smoke and brine. You scrub your tunic on a plank, careful not to lose your balance as the ship rocks. The rhythm of rowing provides an odd sort of percussion. You start humming. A younger crewmate laughs. "You singing to your laundry now?" Someone has to. These wrinkles won't smooth themselves. A joke, but not entirely true. You spread the tunic across a shield, letting the wind do the drying. The Viking longship, for all its glory, doubles as a rather efficient drying rack. Cloth flaps like banners above you, wool, linen, even the occasional bit of dyed silk. It's like a floating laundry day, except with more axes. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor you. Vikings often lived for weeks or months at sea, and archaeological evidence shows that they maintained hygiene far better than most medieval Europeans. Combs, tweezers, and even small stone soap vessels have been found in ship burials, suggesting grooming and cleanliness were daily concerns, not luxuries. You take pride in that thought. The Vikings weren't the filthy barbarians Hollywood sometimes paints. They were meticulous, practical, even a little vain. And as your tunic flaps dry in the wind, you realize vanity isn't so bad when the alternative is mildew. By midday, the wind picks up, turning the deck into a makeshift dance floor of tumbling buckets and fluttering shirts. You pin your laundry beneath a rope and improvise a primitive clothesline. The others join in, laughing as they fasten their garments with bits of bone or fishhook. The ship suddenly looks like a strange parade of ghosts, each shirt puffed with wind, sleeves reaching for the sky. Then, the clouds darken. A squall brews fast, the sea bucking beneath you. Everyone scrambles to secure gear. You yank the last of your damp clothes under the tarp just as the rain hits, needles of cold water slapping your skin. The storm roars for hours, drenching everything that isn't lashed down. When it passes, the world feels raw and scrubbed clean. You crawl out, soaked but grinning. Your clothes survived. Mostly. The salt has stiffened them into something resembling armor, but you know how to fix that. Once the sun reappears, you beat the cloth against the railing, loosening the fibers, then rub it with a smooth pebble you've pocketed for this very reason. Improvised ironing. Sea edition. It's not perfect, but neither are you. Later, as evening falls, you sit by the small brazier at the center of the ship. Someone passes around smoked fish, someone else tunes a lyre. The flames flicker across faces. Sunburned, wind-chapped, alive. You stretch your cloak near the fire, letting the warmth chase away the damp. The fabric softens, and a faint curl of steam rises. The same trick you used back home. Heat plus patience equals smoothness. Here's your quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found that Viking sails were often made from wool, treated with animal fat and urine to waterproof them. Some scholars speculate that this same technology might have been applied to clothing on long voyages, essentially waterproofing fabric with a mix of natural oils. Imagine explaining that at laundry day. Just soaking my shirt in cowpea. It's for protection. Your friend Bjorn grins at your makeshift ironing session. You're going to be the only wrinkle-free raider in all of Norway. Someone has to set the standard. Historians still argue whether Vikings cared more about appearance or practicality at sea. Some claim grooming was just survival. Lice prevention, warmth conservation, a way to keep disease at bay. Others insist it was also pride, an expression of discipline, of control over the elements. Watching your reflection shimmer faintly in the dark water, you think it's both. That night, the ship rocks gently, the sky a bowl of silver stars. You lie back, using a bundle of folded cloth as a pillow, your freshly pressed tunic draped nearby to dry completely. The air smells of tar and salt and faint ash soap. Your muscles ache, but your mind drifts easy. You think of home, the quiet sound of a hearth, the creak of the drying rack by the fire. Civilization feels far away, but then again, you carry a small piece of it in every cleaned, smoothed, neatly folded garment. The sea hums beneath you, steady and endless. Your tunic flutters slightly in the night breeze, soft now, almost weightless. You close your eyes. Somewhere in the rhythm of the waves, you imagine your mother's voice saying what every Viking woman must have said to her restless sons. Keep warm. Stay clean. Come home in one piece. You smile into the dark.
The fog rolls in thick the next morning, wrapping the ship like a damp wool blanket. You wake to the sound of waves whispering against the hull, the world reduced to grays and echoes. No horizon, no sun, just mist and breath and the rhythmic creak of the mast. For a moment, you could be anywhere, or nowhere. It feels otherworldly, and maybe, just maybe, it is. You're headed toward the coast of Scotland, or so the navigator claims, but in this haze you might as well be sailing through a dream. The men are quiet, half from fatigue, half from superstition. Fog at sea always stirs old stories. You pull your cloak tighter, still faintly smelling of smoke and salt, and settle beside the small brazier someone's managed to coax into life. Its glow flickers on your damp tunic, steam rising slowly as it dries. You remember tales from your childhood, the ones about the Valkyries, winged maidens who appeared on battlefields, choosing who would die and who would live. But before they earned their feathers, they were said to do laundry. Strange, right? Celestial beings scrubbing tunics in streams of blood and foam. The washer at the ford, your grandmother called her. The spirit who appeared before death, washing the clothes of the soon-to-die. You shiver. Not from cold exactly. Your ship glides close to shore at last, the fog thinning enough to reveal dark cliffs and a narrow strip of beach. The crew drops anchor, and you're sent to shore to fill the water barrels. The air is thick with peat smoke and seaweed, the sand coarse under your boots. You carry your bucket toward a small stream trickling down from the hills. The water is red-tinged from iron-rich soil. At least that's what you tell yourself. As you kneel, a figure moves in the mist upstream. A woman, bent over the water, beating fabric against a stone. Her hair gleams pale as frost, and her dress clings wetly to her legs. You freeze, watching. The rhythmic slap of fabric echoes through the valley, soft but steady. You call out, a cautious greeting. She doesn't answer. You take a step closer. The mist curls around her like smoke, and suddenly she looks up. Her face is unreadable, neither kind nor cruel, just ancient. You blink, and she's gone. The stream runs smooth and empty, only ripples left behind. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Probably a trick of the light, you tell yourself. Too much fog, too little sleep. You fill the buckets and hurry back to the ship, not daring to look over your shoulder.
Later, you tell the story around the fire, and no one laughs. Bjorn just nods solemnly. "The washerwoman," he says. "Seen her myself once. She cleans the tunics of the dead." You try to make a joke, something about needing her help with your laundry, but it falls flat. No one smiles. The fire crackles in the silence. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. Women in Viking society often managed the household, including textile production, spinning, weaving, dyeing, and yes, laundry. They were skilled artisans, running looms that could produce fabric wide enough for ship sails. Textile work wasn't just domestic drudgery, it was power. Cloth was currency. A well-made tunic could be worth as much as a weapon. But here's the quirky tidbit that tangles with myth. In Norse folklore, female spirits known as Valkyrie and Nornir often appear near water, washing blood-stained garments before battle or death. Some scholars argue these myths grew from real women, laundresses who worked by rivers and streams, whose eerie, rhythmic labor inspired supernatural stories. Imagine that, doing your chores so dramatically you become a legend. You lean back, watching the sparks rise into the fog. The boundary between myth and memory feels thin tonight. Maybe all gods were born from chores that looked too mysterious in bad lighting. Historians still argue whether the washer at the ford legend originated in Norse culture or blended from Celtic influences. Some point to early Irish texts mentioning Beanihi, the death washer woman. Others think the Norse simply borrowed and reshaped the story, as they did with many beliefs during their travels. Either way, you're caught between curiosity and unease. The next morning, the fog has lifted, and the coastline is clear again. The world feels ordinary once more. Boats, gulls, chores. You half expect to find your laundry neatly folded by the mast, but of course it's still a wrinkled heap. Spirits may wash for the dead, but they don't do favors for the living. As the crew prepares to set sail again, you take your tunic and hold it up to the light. The creases seem sharper somehow, like faint scars across the cloth. You smooth them with your palms, then with your whalebone tool, slow and deliberate. Each stroke feels like a small defiance against chaos, against superstition, against the pull of fate itself. You think of that woman by the stream, and something in you softens. Maybe laundry has always been a kind of ritual, washing away yesterday, preparing for what comes next. A quiet spell of renewal. The sails catch wind, and the ship moves again. You glance back once at the fading coastline. The fog clings to the rocks like a veil. For a moment, you imagine the washerwoman still there, rinsing eternity out of someone's shirt. Then she's gone, swallowed by distance and salt air. You exhale, half laughing at yourself. "I need less mead," you mutter. Or more, depends on what you want to see. You both laugh this time, the tension finally breaking. The ocean stretches wide and glinting before you, and the rhythm of the oars steadies your thoughts. Life at sea demands routine, cleaning, patching, maintaining, repeating. The chores become mantras, keeping madness at bay. You find yourself ironing your cloak again with a heated stone, more out of habit than vanity. The fabric sighs under your touch, the steam curling into the air like a faint ghost. You smile. Laundry, it seems, is both an anchor and a charm. A small mortal spell to remind you that you're still here, still human, still unwrinkled in spirit.
The sea finally calms after days of restless swells, and the air grows heavy with warmth as you sail south, far from the chill breath of the north. The water darkens from steel gray to deep blue, and even the gulls look sleeker, more confident.
like they know you're nearing lands where the sun doesn't bite quite as hard. The crew relaxes too. Cloaks are folded away, sleeves rolled up, and conversations turn from storms to spoils. And that's when you see it, the faint line of a foreign coast, dotted with markets, spires, and colors that shimmer like the inside of a shell. You're docking at a trading port somewhere near the Frankish kingdoms, where every smell, tar, spice, roasted nuts, and wet wool mingles in glorious confusion. You step onto the wharf and feel the boards sway underfoot. Traders from every direction shout in languages you don't fully understand. Piles of fabrics catch your eye, crimson silks, golden brocades, linen so fine you could almost see through them. They gleam in the sun like captured light. A merchant in a turban beckons you closer, holding out a piece of silk that feels like water between your fingers. It's impossibly smooth, the kind of fabric that mocks your rough homespun wool. You rub it between thumb and forefinger, marveling. "From Milcard," the merchant says proudly. "Constantinople, the legendary city where East meets West. You've heard tales of its opulence, its shimmering mosaics and endless markets. Standing here, silk in hand, you believe them all. You trade a chunk of amber for a small length of the fabric. It's extravagant, yes, but the thought of returning home with it, it's irresistible. You imagine the faces of your village when they see it. You, the traveler, the trader, the bringer of beauty. Not bad for someone who started by scrubbing tunics beside a smoky hearth. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Viking trade routes stretched astonishingly far, east to the rivers of Russia, south to Byzantium, and even as far as Baghdad. Silk fragments have been found in Norse graves across Scandinavia, suggesting these textiles were prized possessions, reserved for decoration or burial garments. They weren't just cloth, they were trophies.
By the time you return to the Northlands, the air tastes of iron and wood smoke again. The fjord lies still, silver in the morning light, and your ship glides into its familiar cradle like a long-missed friend. The shore smells of home, peat fires, drying fish, and freshly beaten cloth stretched over racks to catch the weak sun. After months at sea, it feels right, real. But there's something else tugging at your curiosity now, a question you didn't have when you left. How much of what you do will survive the centuries? You unload your goods, amber, furs, silk, and carry your chest back to your longhouse. When you push the door open, the warmth hits you like a welcome slap. Inside, your whalebone smoother still rests where you left it. You set your foreign fabrics beside it, amused that these humble tools of the North and the luxuries of the South now share a table. The fire pops in approval. Later that week, word spreads that a group of scholars from distant lands, Frankish monks probably, has arrived to study Norse curiosities. You join them out of interest, your tunic freshly pressed, your curiosity sharper than your axe. They sift through burial mounds and charred ruins, brushing dirt from artifacts. Smooth stones, glass discs, bits of scorched metal. You crouch beside them, and for a moment, it's like looking backward through time. You recognize the shapes. The whalebone, the bronze disc, the familiar curve of a smoother's handle. You want to tell them, that's not jewelry, that's for flattening linen, but you don't. You just watch as they catalog it all under mystery object. Here is your mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists have indeed uncovered countless Viking artifacts that suggest ironing-like practices, polished stones, bone tools, and small metal pans possibly used to heat and press fabric. These items often appear in women's graves, hinting that textile care held a respected, even symbolic place in domestic life. One of the scholars squints at a blackened stone and mutters something in Latin. You lean closer. It's cracked, but you can see where centuries of hands smoothed it down to a silky shine. You could almost feel those fingers still pressing, still smoothing, still trying to bring order to chaos. You can't resist. You pick up a nearby stone, rub it against a scrap of wool. The scholar gives you a baffled look. It works better warm, you tell him with a smirk. He blinks, then scribbles furiously in his notebook. You wonder if you just accidentally rewritten a small corner of history. When you head home that evening, the weight of time feels heavy and sweet. You think about all those artifacts buried beneath fields and fjords, waiting to be misunderstood. The cracked whalebone that once belonged to someone like you. The ash-stained cloth that still carries the shape of a human hand. You imagine centuries from now, archaeologists hunched over their finds, arguing in soft academic tones. Were these grooming tools? Ceremonial objects? Toys? Someone will say, maybe they were used for pressing fabric. And another will scoff, but why would Vikings care about wrinkles? You grin into the twilight. Oh, if only they knew. Here's your quirky tidbit. In one excavation in Norway, archaeologists discovered what they first believed to be miniature shields buried beside a woman's body. On closer inspection, they realized the pieces were actually bronze linen smoothers, small convex pans that may have been heated with coals and used to iron delicate fabrics. So yes, some Viking women literally took their irons to the grave. Talk about commitment to presentation. The scholars back at camp are still debating. Some insist these artifacts were ritualistic, symbols of domesticity rather than tools of labor. Others argue they were status markers, proof of wealth. And of course, historians still argue whether the Vikings' obsession with grooming and garment care reflected practicality or vanity. You think it was both. The practical always turns into the beautiful when people have time to breathe. That night, sitting by the fire, you find yourself smoothing the hem of your new silk tunic. The fabric gleams, catching the firelight in ripples of gold and blue. The same motion your ancestors made with their wool, now reborn in finer form. The same need to tidy, to tend, to perfect.
A young child runs by and asks what you're doing. You smile. Ironing, you say. She frowns. What's that? You pause. The word doesn't really exist yet. It's when you make something rough, smooth again. She nods, satisfied, and darts off. You watch her go, thinking that someday she'll tell her children, who will tell theirs, and maybe the word, or at least the act, will survive in the folds of time. You wake the next morning to the sound of hammers and saws. The scholars are building crates, packing their finds to send south. You wander over and watch as they tuck your people's everyday tools into straw, labeling them ritual objects. You almost laugh. If only they'd seen the real rituals. Mothers washing by the stream, traders rubbing wrinkles from cloaks before meeting a jarl, sailors beating cloth against ship rails while singing off-key. You think of the washerwoman in the fog again, the myth born from labor, the sacred woven through the ordinary. Maybe she's pleased tonight, knowing the living still smooth their shirts in her memory. The sun dips low, the air sharp with the promise of winter. You hang your tunic by the fire, watching the steam curl upward like a ghost leaving the fabric. You press a palm to it, warm, flat, perfect. And for a fleeting second, you feel connected to every hand that ever did the same. Past, present, and all the quiet futures waiting to be unearthed. You imagine someone centuries from now kneeling in this very spot. A digger with gloves and a brush, uncovering your smoother, your ironstone, maybe even a scrap of your tunic. They'll wonder who you were. A trader? A tailor? A dreamer with too much time and too little patience for wrinkles? You smile at the thought. Let them wonder. Let them argue. The truth doesn't need to be written. It's pressed right into the fabric.
Winter arrives quietly, dusting the fjord and surrounding hills with a soft, pale blanket. The longhouse smells of peat, roasted meats, and the faint tang of wet wool. Outside, the wind bites sharply, rattling the shutters, but inside, warmth holds you in a gentle embrace. You sit near the hearth, your hands busy with another tunic, smoothing the fabric carefully, almost reverently. After months of travel, silk and stone ironing, it feels grounding, returning to the ritual that began it all. You think about the stories the wind carried from foreign lands, markets, silk merchants, and the astonishing array of fabrics you'd seen, and yet here you are, surrounded by homespun cloth, warmed stones, and the scent of firewood. Civilization, it seems, comes in layers, the exotic over the familiar, the rare over the routine. Both are necessary. Both are beautiful. A young apprentice watches you curiously. "Why do you press so much?" he asks. "Does it really matter?" You pause, the whalebone smoother resting in your hands. "Because," you reply slowly, "wrinkles are evidence that someone didn't care. And sometimes caring, even about small things, can make the world feel a little less chaotic." He nods solemnly, probably thinking he's witnessing ancient wisdom. You secretly hope he remembers it when he's older and far away from the hearth. The fire crackles and you move to another piece of wool, heated stones glinting beside you. Each press releases a tiny wisp of steam, curling lazily into the air. You notice the rhythm now, the same gentle cadence as the oars on the longship, the slap of cloth against a riverbank, the swipe of whalebone across linen in distant lands. The ritual is everywhere, timeless and constant. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Vikings valued textiles not only for warmth, but also as symbols of wealth, skill, and identity. Burial garments, even modest ones, often reflected care and social standing, and evidence suggests that smooth, well-maintained clothing was a sign of pride, competence, and respect for oneself
and for others. A mischievous thought crosses your mind. Maybe the gods themselves were impressed by neat tunics. Thor might strike with his hammer, but only after checking if your seams are straight. You laugh softly, shaking your head. The apprentice giggles, pointing at the stones. Do you think they'll remember us? You glance at the polished whalebone, at the scraps of silk from Byzantium, at the tiny folded bundles of linen. Maybe, you say, but it's not really about being remembered. It's about what you leave behind, even if nobody ever sees it. The care, the effort, the smoothness. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Viking artifacts suggest that smoothers were sometimes intentionally buried alongside their owners, perhaps as symbols of domestic skill or even guardianship in the afterlife. In a sense, ironing could be a form of legacy, a tactile signature left for eternity. You smooth another sleeve, thinking about the journey, the storms, the silk, the fog, the washerwoman, and the longship rocking gently on the waves. All those experiences condensed into the simple act of pressing fabric, ordinary, yet extraordinary. Historians still argue whether Viking textile care was purely functional or carried ceremonial and symbolic weight. You think the answer is obvious. It was both. Every stroke of a smoother, every heated stone pressed, every careful fold is a conversation with history, a whispered echo of continuity. Outside, snow begins to settle, soft and silent. The longhouse glows from within, inviting and steady. You lean back, letting the warmth seep into your bones, your hands still resting lightly on the fabric. The ritual ends, not with fanfare, but with quiet satisfaction. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the threads weaving through time, connecting past and future, the small and the vast. The wind sighs outside, the fire crackles, and the faint scent of ash and wool lingers. The world feels right, calm, complete. And somewhere deep in the folds of history, you realize this. Ironing isn't just about fabric. It's about care. It's about order. It's about leaving a trace, however small, that says, I was here, I mattered, I pressed my life into something beautiful.
The hearth's warmth wraps around you like a familiar blanket. You sit still, hands resting lightly on folded fabric, letting the day's rhythm fade into memory. Outside, snow drifts silently, muffling the world. There's no urgency now, only the gentle pulse of life in this quiet longhouse. Every creak of timber, every sigh of firewood seems to echo softly through the room, grounding you in the present. You breathe slowly, feeling the cool touch of the stone and the softness of wool beneath your fingers. Steam curls faintly from a recently pressed tunic, rising in slow, ghostly spirals that vanish into the air. The ritual, the journey, the effort, all of it condenses into a serene tableau. Even the chaos of storms, salt water, distant markets, and foreign silk feels distant now, part of a larger tapestry that makes this moment tender and vivid. Outside, the world is hushed. The fjord gleams faintly under the pale winter sun. The wind whispers through trees, over frozen streams, past distant peaks. The universe seems immense, yet contained in this warmth, in this quiet, in the simple act of care. You can almost feel history stretching, threads of countless hands smoothing fabric, tending hearths, and pressing small acts of love into everyday life. You let your eyelids fall, the glow of firelight soft against your face. In this hush, the longhouse, the snow, the flicker of steam, all merge into a lullaby.
You are both a witness and participant, threading your presence into the ongoing story. The world, wild and unpredictable, can wait. You rest, knowing that the ordinary, tended with care, is extraordinary in itself. Now, let your mind drift slowly, carrying you across fjords, longships, hearths, and the endless soft rustle of pressed fabric. Every wrinkle smoothed is a whisper of patience. Every steam curl a quiet victory. Let the warmth seep deep, the hush surround you, and the rhythm of care lull you into gentle calm.